Welcome to Calm Buddha, as the final light of day fades into the tranquil hues of twilight. We invite you to find your own place of quiet refuge. Imagine you are walking along a worn stone path leading to the heart of an ancient temple. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint sweet scent of jasmine and sandalwood. You step into a central courtyard bathed in the soft, luminous glow of a full moon. Here, amidst the serene silence, we begin our journey into the deepest questions of the human heart. You may have come here carrying a heavy burden, a thought, an image, a memory of a single person that refuses to leave your mind no matter how hard you try to push it away. This persistent presence, this quiet echo in your consciousness can feel like a relentless splinter, a constant low-level ache that never fully subsides. You have likely spent countless hours wrestling with it, wishing it would simply disappear, promising yourself that tomorrow will be the day you finally let go. But what if this struggle is not only unnecessary but also a profound misunderstanding? What if this person who haunts your thoughts, whose voice echoes in your quiet moments, isn't there by accident? What if this mental visitor is not a sign of your weakness but a messenger carrying a message meant specifically for you? This is the profound truth that has been contemplated in silent meditation halls and ancient forests for over 2,500 years. This isn't a quick fix or an empty promise. It is the wisdom of the human heart passed down from the Buddha himself, a man who understood that our most persistent thoughts are not our enemies, but our greatest teachers. Take a gentle breath. Release the tension you hold in your shoulders, in your chest, in your jaw. Let go of the need to fight. This journey begins not with techniques for forgetting, but with the wisdom for seeing clearly. After all, what truly exhausts us is not the presence of these thoughts, but our constant struggle against them, the way we wage an inner war with what is already happening within our own minds. Imagine your consciousness is a vast ocean. When the waves of thought arise, we often try to push them back, to force the surface to be still. But the more we fight the waves, the more exhausted we become. The ocean, however, remains unchanged. This is where Buddhist wisdom opens its hands to us, offering a perspective that might feel strange at first. It teaches us that these persistent thoughts aren't a problem to be solved, but a message to be decoded. The person occupying your mind isn't a random intrusion. They are there because something within you needs to learn to heal or to awaken. In the quiet depths of your being, your mind is not your adversary. It is your healer. It is a tireless servant working to bring all of your unfinished stories to a place of rest. The first insight Buddhism offers is that our minds naturally fixate on unresolved experiences. Think of a small pebble lodged in your shoe. Your foot will keep returning to it, not because it is flawed, but because it is trying to find a way to make the shoe comfortable again. Similarly, your mind keeps returning to this person because something remains incomplete, a story that still awaits its final peaceful chapter. This isn't a flaw in your mental functioning. It is your mind's natural wisdom trying to bring itself into a state of wholeness. Your persistent thoughts are not the problem. They are your mind's attempt at a solution. This understanding alone can bring a profound sense of relief. The fact that you can't stop thinking about someone doesn't mean you're weak or obsessed. It means your mind is doing exactly what minds do, trying to process, integrate, and find resolution. The question, therefore, isn't how to stop these thoughts, but what are they trying to show you? What is the lesson contained within their presence? Buddhist wisdom offers a map for this journey, a guide to 7 distinct reasons why someone might refuse to leave your thoughts. Each one is a different key, unlocking a new room within the vast temple of your consciousness. Understanding which of these reasons applies to your situation won't make the thoughts instantly vanish, but it will transform your relationship with them. Instead of unwanted intruders, they become wise messengers. And once you receive the message, once the teaching has been absorbed into the quiet spaces of your heart, the messenger can naturally depart, leaving you in a state of spacious peace. We begin our exploration with the first of these reasons, a pattern perhaps most common and most misunderstood in our hurried world. It is the belief that a desperate clinging feeling is the same as love. Last night, we began our journey into the quiet wisdom of the heart, starting with the understanding that persistent thoughts of a person are not a flaw, but a message. The first message we will decode tonight is perhaps the most common and most misunderstood in our hurried world attachment disguised as love. We live in a culture that often confuses intense emotional fixation with love. We believe that constantly thinking about someone proves the depth of our feelings for them, as if the sheer volume of a thought were a measure of its quality. But Buddhist wisdom draws a crucial and liberating distinction. It teaches us that true love brings spaciousness, while attachment creates a deep sense of constriction. To understand this, imagine 2 gardeners standing in a moonlit temple garden. The first gardener, let's call him the gardener of attachment, finds a beautiful flower and decides it must belong to him. He builds a small cage around it. Fearing the slightest change in the weather, he pulls at its leaves to make them perfectly symmetrical and overwaters it, terrified that it will ever wither or die. His thoughts are not of the flower's well-being, but of his own need. I need this flower to be perfect. I need it to stay this way forever so that I can feel happy. If it withers, I will be nothing. His love is a frantic, grasping love. It is a love that creates a constant internal current of need and anxiety. Now look at the second gardener, the gardener of love. She approaches the same beautiful flower and simply admires it for what it is. She gives it space, provides good soil, and ensures it has plenty of sunlight and water. When its petals begin to fold for the night, she does not feel a sense of loss. She feels a deep and quiet appreciation for its natural cycle. Her thoughts are simply, may you be well. May you thrive in your own way. You are a source of beauty and peace in this world, and I wish for nothing more than your true nature to unfold. Her love is a giving love, a spacious love that allows for freedom and change. When attachment masquerades as love, your thoughts about the person aren't free and appreciative like those of the second gardener. They are clingy and desperate. You don't simply remember them with warmth. You mentally grasp at them, replaying past conversations or meticulously rehearsing imagined future scenarios. Your thoughts are not expansive. They carry a subtle but undeniable undercurrent of need. The need for their approval, their presence, or their reciprocation. This need creates a mental loop, a frantic turning of a wheel in your mind. It keeps them firmly anchored in your awareness, like the cage around the gardener's flower. The Buddha observed this grasping and described attachment as the primary cause of suffering. He taught that when we cling to people as if they were permanent, unchanging entities who could complete us, we set ourselves up for inevitable pain. People change, relationships evolve, and nothing external can ever truly belong to us. When we forget these profound truths, our minds become like hands squeezing too tightly around water. The tighter we grip, the more slips through our fingers, leaving us with a desperate, hollow feeling of lack. This feeling of lack of something missing inside you that only they can provide is a key marker of attachment. You can recognize attachment disguised as love by the very quality of suffering it produces. If thoughts of this person bring a deep sense of something missing or incomplete within you, you are experiencing attachment rather than love. If you feel anxious, jealous, or desperate when they come to mind, that is the voice of attachment speaking. True love, even when tinged with sadness from separation or distance, carries an underlying peace. It is the quiet recognition that you wish for their well-being, regardless of what they can give you. One is a desperate need for your own happiness. The other is a genuine wish for theirs. The thoughts that persist in your mind may be a signal that you are grasping at an illusion holding on to a person who is in reality as fluid and ever-changing as a river. Your mind is inviting you to examine this illusion to see if the suffering you are experiencing is born not of love, but of a constricting, desperate attachment. The first step on this path is simply to, gently without judgment, acknowledge this truth. Last night, we explored how attachment disguised as love can create a constricting loop of thought in our minds. Tonight, we turn our attention to the second reason a person may persist in your mind unprocessed emotion. Imagine your consciousness is a vast, quiet house, and your emotions are the guests who visit. A healthy emotional system knows when to welcome each guest, listen to their message, and then watch them naturally depart. But sometimes a guest arrives with a message you are not ready to hear. Perhaps a relationship ended so abruptly that a feeling was left unspoken, an acknowledgement of hurt was never made, or even a profound joy was not fully allowed to be felt and celebrated. When these emotions remain incomplete, your mind keeps bringing the person back into your awareness, hoping to finish the conversation to finally close the door on the unfinished business. Think of your mind like a computer with too many open tabs. Each unresolved emotion, each unsaid word, each tear you didn't allow yourself to weep is a program still running in the background. It silently consumes your energy, slowing everything down and preventing your mental system from finding a state of true rest. This is a particularly common experience with relationships that ended suddenly, or in situations where social constraints, perhaps a need to be polite or appear strong, prevented you from expressing what you truly felt. The mental image of the person reappears not as a torment, but as an invitation to close these open tabs, to finally give the emotional process the space and attention it needs to complete its natural cycle. Buddhist practice doesn't suggest suppressing these emotions or pretending they don't exist. That would be like closing a program without saving the file. It will only pop back up again later. Instead, it offers a radical and courageous approach, turning toward them with mindful awareness. When thoughts of the person arise, rather than getting caught in the endless mental storyline about them, the what-ifs, the should-haves, the if-onlys, can you simply notice the underlying emotion? Is there a subtle hum of anger, a deep pool of sadness, a dull ache of regret, or a sharp pang of longing? As you sit in the stillness, can you feel where that emotion lives in your body? Perhaps there is a tightness in your chest, a fluttering in your stomach, a heat in your face, or a knot in your throat. You don't need to name the emotion or understand its entire history. You only need to give it your gentle, non-judgmental awareness. As you do this, you are offering a profound act of kindness to yourself. You are telling your mind that it is finally safe to feel, to process, to complete what was left unfinished. There is a profound wisdom in this approach. Emotions, when fully experienced with awareness, naturally complete their cycle. It is our resistance to feeling them, our fear of being overwhelmed, or our judgment about having them that keeps them frozen in place like ice in a cold mountain stream. By bringing gentle awareness to these unprocessed emotions, you give them the space to finally move and transform. A wise Zen teacher once said, "The only way out is through." When it comes to persistent thoughts about someone, the only way to freedom is often by fully experiencing the emotions you have been so carefully avoiding. This doesn't mean indulging in emotional stories or dramatizing feelings. It means simply allowing the raw physical feeling of the emotion to be felt in the body with a kind and gentle awareness, like offering a warm blanket to a shivering part of yourself. This journey of befriending your emotions is a fundamental step toward peace. As you begin to listen to their message, you may discover that some of these feelings are connected to a deeper, unseen story, a story that extends far beyond a single moment in time. Last night, we began to uncover the silent language of our emotions, understanding that some persistent thoughts are simply a mind's courageous attempt to process and complete what has been left unfinished. Tonight, we turn our attention to the third reason someone might occupy your thoughts: karmic entanglement. From a Buddhist perspective, karma isn't a cosmic punishment or a reward system handed down by a distant judge. Instead, it is the natural, elegant law of cause and effect that governs our actions and relationships. Imagine a vast, finely woven tapestry. Most of the threads are short and simple, representing our daily interactions. But every so often, a long, intricate thread weaves through the tapestry, linking two points across time and space. These are relationships that carry a strong karmic charge, a deep sense of unfinished business that extends far beyond the surface of what you can see. You might notice this in connections that impacted you with an intensity that seemed profoundly disproportionate to their duration, or in a sense of recognition from the very first meeting, as if you had known them forever. When someone won't leave your thoughts due to this karmic entanglement, it is often because there is a deep lesson or understanding trying to emerge from within you. Your mind keeps bringing them back into your awareness, not to torment you, but because something remains incomplete in the learning this relationship was meant to facilitate. It is not so much about the person themselves as it is about what they represented in your personal journey. Buddhist wisdom suggests that in such cases, the path forward lies not in trying to forget the person, but in discerning the lesson they were there to teach. What quality were you developing through knowing them? What pattern were they helping you recognize about yourself? What growth were they perhaps unwittingly facilitating in you? There is a timeless story of a woman who was haunted by thoughts of a former friend who had betrayed her trust. For years, she could not escape the memory. Thoughts of this friend would arise, bringing waves of hot, bitter anger and a deep, cold sadness. She was desperate for peace. She tried everything she could imagine to forget. She threw herself into her work. Until she was exhausted, she moved to a new city, hoping a change of scenery would help. And she even attempted rigorous forgiveness practices that felt empty and forced. Nothing worked. The thoughts remained a relentless and painful echo in the quiet spaces of her mind. Finally, in desperation, she went on a meditation retreat to a remote monastery nestled among quiet ancient trees. For days, she sat in the stillness trying to banish the thought of her friend. But the more she tried, the more vividly the face would appear. One evening, as she sat watching the moonlight pour through the window of the meditation hall, something shifted. The image of her friend appeared, but for the first time, the anger was not as sharp. She was able to look at the image not as an enemy, but as a silent messenger. As she sat with this quiet presence, a profound insight emerged from the depths of her being, an understanding that had been buried for years. She realized that the relationship had been trying to teach her something essential. She had abandoned herself long before her friend had abandoned her. She had ignored her own quiet intuition, dismissed her own needs, and compromised her own boundaries in a desperate attempt to please her friend and keep the relationship. The friend's betrayal was painful, yes, but it was a perfect mirror showing her a pattern of self-betrayal that had been present in her life all along. The moment she fully grasped this understanding, the moment she let go of the attachment to a perfect outcome and fully accepted the truth of her own complicity in the story, the thoughts of her friend began to fade. The karmic lesson had been learned. The teacher had completed its task and the inner work was finally done. When you can name the learning clearly, when you can fully receive the message, you often find that the messenger, the persistent thought, can naturally and gracefully depart. Last night, we understood that some of our deepest connections carry a lesson that our mind will not let go of until it is learned. Tonight, we turn our attention to the fourth reason someone persists in your mind, what Buddhism calls projection of the shadow. Imagine that the human heart is like a house with many rooms. Throughout our lives, we are told that certain qualities are unacceptable. Perhaps we are taught that anger is wrong, vulnerability is weak, or a desire for rest is lazy. So we close the doors to those rooms and pretend they don't exist, pushing those parts of ourselves into the shadows. But those qualities, those parts of us do not simply disappear. Instead, we project them onto others, and those people become living, breathing mirrors, reflecting back the very things we have disowned. The person who won't leave your thoughts may be carrying a projection of your disowned qualities, and your mind keeps bringing them back into focus, hoping you will finally look into the mirror they provide. This mechanism explains why we sometimes can't stop thinking about people we claim to dislike. The very qualities that infuriate you or captivate you in them are reflecting aspects of yourself you have not fully accepted or integrated. If their unyielding confidence infuriates you, you might be projecting your own unexpressed confidence, a part of you that has been told to stay small. If their apparent neediness repels you, you might be projecting your own disowned vulnerability, a part of you that has never felt safe enough to ask for help. Our strongest reactions, both of repulsion and fascination, often point directly to our deepest projections. Our minds keep bringing them into awareness, not to torment us, but to show us parts of ourselves that are desperately asking for acknowledgement and integration. Buddhist practice suggests looking carefully at what qualities in this person trigger the strongest reactions in you. What about them most captivates or repels your attention? Then, with honesty and compassion, ask yourself, where might this quality also exist within me? Perhaps in a different form. This investigation isn't about blame, it is about wholeness. By reclaiming these projections, you not only free yourself from obsessive thinking about the other person, but you also become more integrated and authentic. The parts of yourself that you have been encountering through them can finally come home. There is a timeless story about a man who was consumed by his work, constantly toiling in his fields from sunrise to sunset. He was a good man, dedicated and responsible, but his heart was filled with a subtle judgment toward his neighbor. The neighbor seemed to have a different rhythm of life. He would often be found relaxing in his garden, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. "He is so lazy," the man would mutter to himself, shaking his head. "So irresponsible. If he would just work a little harder, his life would be so much better." His obsessive thoughts about his neighbor became a constant low murmur in his mind, fueling his own tireless work ethic. One day, the man fell gravely ill. His body, exhausted from years of ceaseless labor, simply gave out. He was confined to his bed with nothing to do but lie there, unable to work. From his window, he could see his neighbor in the garden, still watching the clouds. For the first time in years, the man had to confront his own stillness. In the silence of his room, something unexpected happened. As his physical exhaustion forced him to stop, his judgmental thoughts about his neighbor began to soften. He started to see the peace in his neighbor's posture, the contentment in his quiet gaze. He realized that deep within himself, beneath the layers of guilt and duty, was a desperate longing for rest, for permission to simply be without constant productivity. The very quality he had condemned in his neighbor was one his own soul was craving. In that profound moment of recognition, his obsessive thoughts about the neighbor began to fade. The external mirror had served its purpose. By facing his own repressed desire for rest and self-acceptance, he no longer needed to project it onto another. The parts of himself he had exiled had finally come home, and with their return, the constant, demanding thought of his neighbor released its grip on his mind. It is in this same way that the next of our 7 reasons can trap us when we cling to an imagined future instead of embracing the present reality. Last night, we explored the idea of the shadow self and how our persistent thoughts can be a mirror reflecting parts of ourselves that have been denied or exiled. Tonight, we turn our attention to the 5th reason someone might dominate your thoughts: fixation on outcome. Often we can't stop thinking about a person because we are deeply attached to a specific resolution or a particular future scenario involving them. It could be the desire for an apology, a moment of reconciliation, a chance to have the last word, or some form of closure that we believe will finally bring us peace. This craving for a specific outcome creates a mental holding pattern. Your thoughts about this person loop back again and again, like a record player with a scratched record, because your mind believes there is still something to be gained, resolved, or proven. Imagine your mind as a movie theater. When you are fixated on an outcome, you are not living in the present moment, but are instead replaying the same short film on an endless loop. This film might be a meticulously rehearsed conversation you wish you'd had, a fantasy of them returning and regretting their choices, or a vengeful scenario where your worth is finally recognized. These mental loops consume an immense amount of energy, keeping your mind from a state of rest. The very fact that you can't stop thinking about them is proof that your mind believes there is a final scene to be played, a conclusion that once reached will make everything make sense. But Buddhist wisdom on this is both simple and radical. True peace comes from accepting what is not, from achieving a particular outcome. As long as you believe your well-being depends on something specific, happening with this person, them apologizing, recognizing your worth, or returning to you, your mind will remain fixated on them. The practice here involves a profound shift from attachment to outcome to acceptance of reality as it is now. This doesn't mean you approve of what happened or that you wouldn't prefer a different situation. It simply means you stop postponing your peace until some external condition is met. You acknowledge that the movie has ended, even if the ending was not the one you desired. There is a timeless Zen story that illustrates the immense weight of this mental burden. A young monk and his senior companion were traveling a long, muddy road. As they rounded the bend, they came upon a deep, muddy puddle. A beautiful young woman dressed in fine silk robes stood at the edge, unable to cross for fear of ruining her garments. Without a word or a moment of hesitation, the senior monk picked up the woman, carried her across the mud, and set her down gently on the other side. He then continued on his journey. The younger monk was shocked. He said nothing at the time, but hours later, as they continued their journey in silence, he could no longer contain his frustration. How could you break your vow and carry that woman? He asked, his voice sharp with judgment. The senior monk stopped, turned to his companion, and with a gentle smile replied, "I put her down on the other side of the road hours ago. Are you still carrying her?" In the same way, many of us continue to carry people and past situations in our minds long after the actual interaction has ended. We are weighed down, not by what happened, but by our rigid attachment to how we believe things should have been. This weight, this mental burden of what if arc is far heavier than the original experience. When you release the need for a specific outcome and instead fully accept the reality of the present moment, you stop carrying the other person in your mind. This profound internal shift is what allows the mental loops to finally come to a graceful end. Last night, we saw how a mind can become fixated on an outcome carrying a heavy burden long after a situation has ended. Tonight, we turn to the sixth reason someone might persist in your mind, a profound force known as spiritual magnetism. This is a connection that transcends personal preference or superficial attraction, operating instead on the level of consciousness itself. From a Buddhist perspective, we are drawn to certain people by a deeper, often subconscious recognition. Some connections act as mirrors reflecting back to us an aspect of our own consciousness that we desperately need to see more clearly. When someone remains in your thoughts due to this spiritual magnetism, there is often a quality they embody that represents a truth for your own path, a doorway to a new way of being. Perhaps they live with an authenticity you're being called toward, or they embody a freedom your soul recognizes but has not yet claimed. Or perhaps their very suffering reflects something you need to acknowledge and heal within yourself. These people are not random players in your life. They act as catalysts, activating aspects of your awareness that were previously dormant, like a quiet stream that begins to flow again after being stirred by a gentle hand. Your mind keeps bringing them into focus because the mirror they provide is still serving a purpose in your awakening. It's not about them as a person to be possessed or a fantasy to be indulged. It is about a teaching to be received, rather than trying to forget them. Buddhist wisdom suggests a radical approach to examine what quality of being or understanding they represent for you. What is it about them that truly resonates with the quietest part of your soul? There is a beautiful Buddhist concept for these individuals. They are called Dharma friends, people who come into our lives to facilitate our spiritual growth. Sometimes they do so through harmony and support, but often and more powerfully, they do so through challenge. The person occupying your thoughts may be playing this role for you, whether they realize it or not. By recognizing and honoring this function, you can receive the profound gift they are offering without becoming fixated on the packaging it came in. There is a story of a young man who was deeply committed to his meditation practice, yet he found himself unable to stop thinking about the woman he had met briefly at a silent retreat. He wasn't attracted to her in a conventional romantic sense, but her presence had affected him in a way he couldn't explain. Her image would appear in his mind during his sitting practice, and instead of finding peace, he felt a deep confusion and a subtle sense of lack. He tried to push her image away, telling himself it was just an obstacle to his spiritual progress. But the more he resisted, the more the thought persisted. Finally, in a moment of exasperation, he brought his struggle to his teacher. The teacher listened patiently and then asked the simple question, "What about her affects you so deeply? What is it you see in her when her image arises?" The student sat in silence for a long time. Then he spoke of her stillness, her unhurried movements, and the quiet contentment that seemed to radiate from her very being. He realized that she embodied a quality of gentle self-acceptance that he was desperately struggling to develop. He had spent his life striving, judging himself, and constantly pushing for perfection. The woman's presence, in its simple grace, was a perfect mirror for the very peace he was seeking. Through his teacher's guidance, his mind began to shift. He started to see the image of the woman not as a romantic obsession, but as a living reminder of the quality he was being called to cultivate. His mind kept bringing her back, not out of attachment to her, but as a reminder of his own deeper calling to accept himself just as he was. Once he recognized this, he could appreciate the teaching without becoming fixated on the teacher. The thoughts of her still rose, but they no longer brought confusion or pain. He became a gentle reminder to return to his own heart, to rest in the quiet self-acceptance she had shown him was possible. This transformative realization leads us to the most profound of all teachings, one that invites us to see through the very nature of ourselves and others. Last night, we understood that some people enter our lives with a profound sense of purpose, acting as mirrors that reflect back to us the qualities we need to cultivate on our path to awakening. Tonight, we turn to the seventh and most profound reason someone won't leave your thoughts, what Buddhism calls the teaching of emptiness. This teaching points to an ultimate truth that nothing in existence, not you, not me, not the person in your thoughts, exists as a solid, separate, or independent entity. Imagine a quiet moonlit lake. Its surface appears to be a single solid sheet of silver. But when a single drop of rain falls, a ripple appears. The ripple has a form, a beginning, and an end, but it has no solid substance of its own. It is simply a movement of the water. In the same way, what we take to be distinct individuals are actually dynamic processes, constantly changing and interconnected with everything around them. Your persistent thoughts are like the ripples, and the person in your thoughts is like a wave that keeps returning to the shore. They may have a powerful presence, but they have no solid, fixed existence. When someone becomes a persistent presence in your mind, despite all your efforts to forget them, they may be serving as your personal teacher of this profound truth. Through this relationship, your mind is being invited to recognize the fluid, impermanent nature of what you considered to be you and them. The The suffering that comes from obsessive thoughts arises largely from believing in two solid, separate entities, me in here and them out there. We then create endless stories about what should happen between these supposedly separate beings. But Buddhist meditation practices invite us to look more closely. When you examine the thoughts themselves, you discover they are not solid things. They are momentary appearances in awareness, rising, changing, and passing like the waves on a vast ocean. And the you, whose thinking is happening, is not a fixed entity either, but a flowing process of sensations, perceptions, and consciousness. Even the person you're thinking about isn't the static character your mind has constructed, but a complex, ever-changing being. As this understanding deepens, the sense of being a separate, fixed self, haunted by thoughts of another separate self, naturally begins to dissolve. What remains is simply awareness itself, in which all experiences, including thoughts of this person, arise and pass without creating a problem. A Zen master described this process beautifully through the metaphor of mountains and rivers. He said there are 3 stages of understanding. In the first stage, before spiritual practice, we see the world with a conventional, dualistic mind. Mountains are solid mountains separate from us, and rivers are separate rivers. We see people as fixed, solid entities separate from ourselves. We love them, we hate them, we cling to them, and we fight against them. This is the stage of identification and struggle. In the second stage, as we begin to practice, our dualistic view begins to break down. We realize that nothing is truly separate. We start to see the interconnectedness of all things. The illusion of solid boundaries dissolves, and we see that the mountains are not separate from the river, and the river is not separate from us. This is the stage where the Zen master says, mountains are no longer mountains, and rivers are no longer rivers. It can be a confusing, disorienting stage as our conventional reality seems to dissolve. But then, in the third stage, after awakening, we return to the world and see things as they are, but with a new understanding. The Zen master says, mountains are mountains again, and rivers are rivers again. We relate to people naturally, but without the illusion of solid separation that creates suffering. We see them not as fixed entities to be possessed or forgotten, but as fellow travelers on the river of life. The person who once seemed to have so much power over your mind now simply appears within the open, spacious awareness of your consciousness. They are no longer a problem to be solved, but a natural movement of mind, like a cloud passing through the sky. These 7 reasons for persistent thoughts are not mutually exclusive. Often several operate simultaneously. They are not simply psychological explanations. They all point toward this deeper nature of mind itself and our fundamental relationship with reality. Understanding them doesn't make persistent thoughts instantly vanish, but it transforms your relationship with those thoughts from a place of struggle to a place of profound insight. And now, armed with this wisdom, we can turn our attention to what to do in the very moment these thoughts arise. Last night, we traveled to the heart of the most profound teaching of all the understanding of emptiness. We saw that our persistent thoughts and the self that seems to be haunted by them are not solid entities, but are in fact fluid and ever-changing. Now we turn from the deep wisdom of understanding to the simple wisdom of action. So what does Buddhism suggest we do? Practically, when someone refuses to leave our thoughts, The answer begins with a single powerful command: stop fighting. Imagine you are in a small boat on a vast river. The current of thoughts about this person is flowing relentlessly. Your instinct might be to grab the oars and row frantically against the current, trying to push your boat back to a place of stillness. But no matter how hard you row, the river of thoughts is stronger, and your struggle only exhausts you. The more you resist these thoughts, label them as problems, or criticize yourself for having them, the more persistent and powerful they become. The struggle itself creates the very suffering you are trying to escape. Instead of this inner war, Buddhist practice suggests a radical shift in approach from rejection to curious investigation. When thoughts of this person arise, rather than pushing them away, can you welcome them as messengers? Can you change your posture from that of a warrior to that of a host? Imagine a knock at the door of your consciousness. Instead of slamming it shut in panic, you open it with a gentle, disarming curiosity. You welcome the thought and ask, not with frustration, but with genuine kindness, what are you here to show me? What remains unresolved? What am I being invited to understand or heal? This simple shift from resistance to receptivity changes the entire dynamic of your relationship with these thoughts. The energy that was once used for struggle can now be used for insight. The next step in this practice involves bringing mindful awareness to the physical and emotional experience that accompanies thoughts of this person, rather than getting caught in the storyline about them. Our thoughts are not just mental events. They have an impact on the body. Can you notice the sensations in your body without judgment? Is there a tightness in your chest, a fluttering in your stomach, or a knot in your throat? Can you feel the emotional tone? Is it a dull ache of longing, a sharp pang of anger, or a deep sadness? Simply bringing gentle, open awareness to these physical and emotional dimensions often allows them to begin shifting naturally, like a cloud dispersing in the wind. By meeting the thoughts at this level, you go beneath the mental story and connect with the raw, honest truth of your experience in the present moment. Buddhist meditation offers specific practices for working with these persistent thoughts. One simple and profound approach is called labeling or noting. When the thought arises, you simply note it, perhaps saying silently to yourself, thinking or remembering, and then gently return your attention to your breath or body sensations. You don't fight the thought or follow its narrative. You just acknowledge its presence like a polite nod to a stranger on the street, and then gently redirect your attention to your breath. This doesn't make the thought disappear immediately, but it changes your relationship with it. You are no longer caught in its grip. The thought is no longer an "I can't stop thinking about them," but a simple impersonal event. Thinking is happening. This practice builds a small but crucial space between you and the thought. It creates a quiet distance that allows you to see the thought for what it is, a passing phenomenon, rather than what it pretends to be, a solid, defining reality. In the next part of our journey, we will explore a practice that seems completely counterintuitive but holds a profound power to release this flow meeting, the thoughts not just with awareness, but with a radical and gentle compassion. Last night, we began our turn toward practical wisdom, understanding that the first and most crucial step is to stop fighting the relentless current of persistent thoughts. Tonight, we will explore a practice that may seem completely counterintuitive, a quiet act of defiance against the instinct for anger and resentment. This is the practice of metta, or loving kindness meditation. When thoughts of this person arise in your mind, the natural response may be to clench, to feel a surge of anger, or to sink into a deep sadness. The practice of metta invites a different response entirely. When thoughts of them arise, you intentionally wish them well, regardless of your history or feelings toward them. You silently offer phrases such as, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you live with ease." This practice doesn't deny any hurt or anger you feel. It is not an act of forced forgiveness or a pretense of peace. Rather, it is a profound acknowledgement that beneath those difficult feelings lies the basic human wish for all beings, including yourself and the person who occupies your thoughts, to be free from suffering. This may seem strange. Why would you wish well to someone you are desperately trying to forget? The wisdom here is profound, for what keeps us fixated on someone is often not love, but subtle forms of aversion, a desperate need for their validation, a stubborn sense of resentment, or a deep lingering judgment. Your mind is bound to them by these very aversions. Imagine these aversions as heavy iron chains, tying your consciousness to them, keeping them firmly anchored in your awareness. You may have believed that these chains would keep them close, but in fact, they are only binding you to your own suffering. By deliberately cultivating goodwill and offering those gentle phrases, you are not working to change the other person. You are working to release the aversions that have been binding you. You are in essence putting down a heavy weight you didn't even realize you were carrying. The very act of offering kindness to the person in your thoughts shifts your relationship with them. You are no longer their victim or their adversary. You become a source of goodwill. This reorients your energy from struggling against them to compassionately holding the entire situation. It untangles the knotted thread of resentment and need, allowing your mind to gradually find a spaciousness that was previously unavailable. This practice is not for the benefit of the other person, but for your own liberation. It frees you from the emotional loop that has kept you bound. As you offer these phrases, you are also cultivating loving kindness for yourself, acknowledging your own pain and the need for your own heart to be at peace. It is an act of deep and quiet self-care. The phrases may feel hollow at first, and that is to be expected. You are not trying to force a feeling you don't have. You are simply planting a seed of goodwill in the fertile soil of your consciousness. The more you water that seed with consistent practice, the more it will grow, gradually softening the hard shell of aversion and judgment, allowing the natural compassion of your heart to shine through. In the stillness of this practice, you find a gentle strength that does not come from pushing away, but from a radical willingness to embrace all of your experience with compassion. And as you embrace this radical kindness, you will find that it becomes much easier to direct your mental energy toward new, more nourishing directions. Last night, we understood that the practice of metta, or loving kindness, can be a radical act of liberation, allowing us to release the aversion that binds us to our persistent thoughts. Tonight, we turn our attention to two additional and equally profound practices that will help us redirect our energy and cultivate a mind that is spacious and at peace. The first is the practice of conscious substitution. When you notice yourself caught in a familiar thought loop about this person, perhaps a memory is playing on repeat or a fantasy is consuming your attention, you intentionally and gently redirect your awareness to something wholesome and nourishing. This is not suppression or denial, which only pushes the thought into a dark corner to gain strength. Instead, it is a skillful redirection of your mental energy. Think of your mind as a garden. You can't simply wish for the weeds to disappear, but you can choose to stop watering them by redirecting your energy and attention to planting and nurturing beautiful flowers, like gratitude for the good in your life, appreciation for those who support you, or immersion in an activity that brings you fully into the present moment. You are in essence choosing what to cultivate. The weeds of obsessive thought, no longer nourished by your attention, will gradually lose their strength and wither on their own. Alongside this, Buddhist wisdom emphasizes the vital importance of patience and self-compassion in this process. Persistent thoughts don't disappear overnight, especially if they are connected to deep patterns or significant relationships. They are not a sign of failure. They are simply a deep-seated habit of the mind. Rather than expecting immediate results or criticizing yourself, when an old thought pattern reemerges, can you approach this journey with the patience you would show to a dear friend or a small child learning a new skill? Can you acknowledge that healing moves at its own pace and cannot be forced through willpower alone? This acceptance of your own pace is the foundation of a beautiful and timeless metaphor in Buddhism about the nature of the mind. The mind is compared to the sky, and all thoughts, emotions, and sensations are like the weather passing through it. The sky itself is vast, open, and luminous. It is the perfect, unchanging backdrop for everything that happens within it. Sometimes the sky is filled with the bright, warm sunshine of joy. Other times it is dotted with the light, wispy clouds of a fleeting memory. And then there are the moments when the sky is filled with the dark, heavy storm clouds of anger, or the cool, persistent drizzle of sadness and regret. But the sky itself remains untouched by the weather moving through it. No matter how dark the storm clouds, they do not stain the sky. No matter how hot the sun, it does not burn the sky. The sky does not resist the clouds or wish for them to go away. It simply holds them in its vastness. In the same way, the person who won't leave your thoughts is like a particular weather pattern that keeps recurring. But this weather doesn't define or diminish the sky of your awareness. No matter how persistent these thoughts may be, the open, limitless space of your consciousness remains untouched by them. As you practice seeing thoughts of this person as temporary weather rather than as defining features of your mind, something profound begins to shift. You begin to realize that you are not your thoughts about them. You are the awareness in which those thoughts appear and disappear. This recognition creates a profound sense of freedom, not because the thoughts have vanished, but because they no longer define or control you. You can see the weather clearly without being caught up in it. Last night, we saw how our mind is like a vast sky that is not defined or limited by the passing weather of our thoughts. Tonight, we turn our attention to the precise mechanics of this process, exploring a profound distinction at the very heart of Buddhist psychology, the difference between awareness and attention. Imagine your mind is a vast open room. Attention is like a focused flashlight with a narrow beam that can only illuminate one object at a time. It shines on a chair, then a table, then a photograph on the wall. Your attention is what you direct to a specific object of experience. Awareness, on the other hand, is the room itself, the vast, open, and spacious container that holds everything the flashlight illuminates and everything it doesn't. When someone won't leave your thoughts, it's as if your flashlight of attention keeps getting pulled to them, lighting up their image again and again. But your awareness, the room remains free, vast and spacious, untouched by the comings and goings of the flashlight beam. The core practice here is to shift your sense of identity. You are not the flashlight of attention which is constantly moving and gets tired and strained. You are the room itself. You are the open, spacious awareness that contains all experience. From this new perspective, thoughts about the person are simply objects appearing in your consciousness like furniture in a room. They don't define who you are or control your experience. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. This shift isn't just a philosophical idea. It has profound practical implications. When you no longer identify with thoughts about this person, when they are no longer my thoughts that say something about me, they lose much of their emotional grip. They become passing phenomena rather than personal problems. This shift in perspective is what the Buddha called the middle way. It's a balanced path that avoids two common and exhausting extremes. The first extreme is indulgence, the obsessive following of every thought, about them analyzing each memory and imagining future scenarios. This is getting lost in the flashlight's beam, forgetting that you are the room. The second extreme is suppression, aggressively trying to push the thoughts out of your mind, telling yourself, I shouldn't be thinking about them, and forcing your attention elsewhere. Both of these extremes actually strengthen the thought's grip on your consciousness. The middle way suggests a different approach entirely, allowing thoughts of this person to arise without judgment. You observe them with gentle curiosity and let them pass naturally without either clinging or rejecting. This stance of non-reactive awareness creates space around the thoughts. They no longer feel so solid or demanding of your attention. They lose their intense hypnotic charge. A Zen teacher once compared this process to dealing with a tantruming child. If you give in to every demand, the tantrums continue. If you respond with anger and punishment, the tantrums intensify. But if you remain calmly present, neither indulging nor rejecting the child, eventually calms down naturally. Our thoughts work the same way. When we respond to them with steady, kind awareness, they gradually lose their intense charge. This is the heart of the practice, to recognize that you are the boundless awareness that is already free, even when thoughts appear within it. Your freedom is not conditional on the absence of particular experiences, but on your capacity to remain in the spaciousness of awareness itself. This is the truth that will guide us as we now explore the deeper meaning of our struggles and our relationship to reality itself. Last night we understood that the mind's true nature is like a vast open sky, and that our practice is to shift our sense of identity from the focused beam of attention to the spaciousness of awareness itself. Tonight we turn our attention to the liberating distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is the inevitable experience of loss, difficulty, and change that comes with being human. The Buddha acknowledged this as the first noble truth, that life in its very nature involves an element of difficulty. But he also made a crucial distinction. Suffering is what we add to pain through our resistance, judgment, and fixation. It's like being shot with the first arrow of pain, and then shooting ourselves with a second, third, and fourth arrow of suffering by judging the pain, blaming ourselves for it, or wishing it away. When someone won't leave your thoughts, the fact of remembering them might be unavoidable pain. But the struggle against these memories, the stories you tell about what they mean, the desperate wish that they weren't happening. That is the suffering. The suffering comes not primarily from the thoughts themselves, but from our craving for reality to be different than it is. The story that something is wrong with you for having these thoughts. The wish for a mind free from their presence. This is the mental resistance that turns simple pain into a deep, lasting suffering. But what if nothing needs to be fixed? What if these persistent thoughts are not obstacles to your well-being, but doorways to a deeper understanding? There is a famous teaching story that illustrates this beautifully. A man was rowing his small boat on a misty morning when suddenly another boat, a large wooden vessel, crashed into his. The man became furious, his body tensed, and he was ready to shout at the careless boatman until the fog cleared. He then saw that the other boat was empty, simply adrift with the current. His anger, having no one to direct itself toward, immediately dissolved. In the same way, when we see that our persistent thoughts are not personal attacks or problems to be solved, but simply movements of mind, empty boats drifting on the river of consciousness, our struggle against them naturally subsides. We may still experience the initial pain of a memory, but we are free from the additional suffering of resistance. This understanding of acceptance connects deeply to the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, anicca. Everything in existence is in constant flux, continuously changing. The person you're thinking about is not the same person they were a year ago or even a moment ago. Your memories of them are not the actual living person, but mental images frozen in time. And you yourself are changing too, moment by moment. When thoughts of someone persist, there is often an underlying unconscious assumption that both you and they are fixed, unchanging entities. But Buddhist wisdom invites us to see through this illusion of permanence. This recognition doesn't make memories disappear, but it softens their emotional intensity. It reminds us that we're not actually relating to the person as they are now, but to our own mental construction of them based on past interactions. This mental image has become frozen in our minds, while the actual person continues to change and evolve beyond our awareness. There is a powerful story of a monk who struggled with constant thoughts of a woman he had known before joining the monastery. Every time her face appeared in his mind, he would berate himself for his lack of spiritual progress, telling himself he was weak and unworthy. This internal conflict only made the thoughts more persistent and painful. Finally, in desperation, he confessed his struggle to his teacher. The teacher smiled and offered unexpected advice. The next time you think of her, don't push her away. He said, bow to her image in your mind and say, thank you for teaching me about attachment. May you be well. This simple, radical shift in approach from rejection to grateful acknowledgement gradually transformed the monk's relationship with these thoughts until they no longer caused suffering. He had stopped fighting the pain and was now free. This practice of meeting difficult thoughts with gratitude rather than resistance connects to the core Buddhist understanding of suffering itself. Last night, we learned to see our pain with clear eyes and to let go of the additional suffering we add through resistance. This liberating shift brings us to the very heart of the Buddha's teachings, the Four Noble Truths. This framework, passed down through generations of masters, serves as a timeless diagnosis and a comprehensive prescription for the human heart. The first noble truth is the recognition that suffering or dukkha exists. In our journey, this is the simple, honest acknowledgement of the pain that comes from being unable to stop thinking about someone. It is the sting of a memory, the ache of longing, the quiet torment of a mind that will not rest. We begin by accepting this pain is real without trying to dismiss or deny it. The second noble truth is that this suffering has a cause. Specifically, it arises from craving the desperate wish for things to be different than they are. In the context of our persistent thoughts, the suffering comes not just from the thoughts themselves, but from the craving for a mind free from their presence. It also comes from the ignorance that sees these thoughts as solid defining realities rather than as passing impermanent phenomena. The third noble truth offers a liberating insight when the causes of suffering cease. Suffering itself naturally subsides. It is a profound promise of peace. It means that freedom from the mental torment of persistent thoughts is not only possible, but it is our natural state waiting to be rediscovered. And finally, the fourth noble truth provides the practical path that leads to the cessation of suffering. This path, often called the Eightfold Path, offers comprehensive guidance for navigating the mind's complexities. Each aspect is a vital tool for working with persistent thoughts. Right view is the wisdom to see things as they are. It means seeing your thoughts about this person not as solid problems or personal failings, but as impermanent, conditioned phenomena, like clouds passing through the sky. This view changes everything. Right. Intention is the honest intention to approach this process with kindness rather than aversion, with a genuine desire for peace rather than a hidden agenda of revenge or control. Right. Speech is about how you talk to yourself about these thoughts. It transforms your inner monologue from harsh judgment, "I should be over this by now," to compassionate acknowledgement. This is a difficult feeling and that's okay. Right. Action involves creating healthy boundaries around activities that trigger obsessive thinking, like limiting how often you check their social media or avoiding places that hold powerful memories. It's about acting in ways that support your inner peace. Right livelihood extends this wisdom to your broader life, ensuring your daily work and choices support a mind that can be present and clear, not one that is constantly stressed or distracted. Right effort is the balanced energy of the middle way we have explored. It is the effort to prevent unwholesome thoughts from arising and to cultivate wholesome states of mind, all without forcing or straining. It is the sweet spot between indulging and suppressing. Right. Mindfulness is the heart of the practice. It is the clear, non-judgmental awareness of thoughts as they arise, persist, and pass away. This is the moment-to-moment presence that allows you to simply witness the thoughts without getting lost in their story. And right concentration is the steady, unwavering focus that allows you to stay present with this awareness, cultivating a deep, calm attention that can rest in the vastness of your consciousness rather than getting lost in the content of your thoughts. Together, these 8 aspects of the path offer a comprehensive approach to working with persistent thoughts, not as isolated techniques, but as different facets of a unified way of being. They remind us that freedom from obsessive thinking isn't achieved through force of will or clever strategies, but through a fundamental shift in how we relate to our own experience. The shift is beautifully captured in a teaching from the Zen tradition. The Great Way is not difficult for those who have no preferences, as long as you are preferring not to think about someone, as long as you are judging these thoughts as problems to be eliminated. you remain caught in the very dynamic that sustains them. But when you drop those preferences and meet each thought with the same clear awareness, regardless of its content, the great way of freedom naturally reveals itself. Last night, we understood that the Eightfold Path offers a comprehensive map for navigating the turbulent seas of our mind, and that freedom comes not from judging our thoughts, but from dropping our preferences for them to be different. Tonight, we turn our attention to another profound dimension of why someone won't leave your thoughts, one that reaches beyond personal psychology and into what Buddhism calls the interconnected nature of all beings. Imagine for a moment that consciousness itself is not contained within individual minds, but is a vast, continuous ocean in which we are all a part. The boundaries we perceive between my mind and your mind are like the crests of individual waves. On the surface, they seem separate, distinct, and independent, but they are all movements of the same ocean. From this perspective, our mental connections with others aren't just psychological phenomena, but expressions of a deeper reality where consciousness is fundamentally interconnected. The boundaries are more like permeable membranes than the solid walls. A wise meditation teacher once described it this way: when someone occupies your thoughts with unusual persistence, sometimes what you're experiencing is a form of consciousness connection that transcends ordinary understanding. Your thoughts of them might be mirroring their thoughts of you, or perhaps there's a resonance between your consciousness and theirs that continues beyond physical proximity. These connections aren't mystical or supernatural. They are expressions of the fundamental interconnectedness that both quantum physics and ancient contemplative traditions recognize at the heart of reality. This interconnected view doesn't mean you should interpret persistent thoughts as evidence of destiny or cosmic significance. Rather, it invites us to hold our experience in a larger, more spacious context that allows for mystery and meaning. Perhaps the person in your thoughts is there partly because there's a resonance between your consciousness and theirs that serves some purpose in the unfolding of both your journeys. It is as if an invisible thread of connection remains active, vibrating with a message that has yet to be fully received. Ancient Buddhist texts speak of what's called mind-to-mind transmission, the recognition that consciousness can connect directly with consciousness beyond the ordinary boundaries of separate identities. While modern interpretations vary, this tradition points toward an understanding that our mental lives aren't as private and separate as we typically assume. The boundaries between minds are more fluid and permeable than our ordinary perception suggests. This perspective doesn't diminish your responsibility for working skillfully with your own mind, but it does suggest that persistent thoughts about someone might sometimes be picking up on a genuine connection that exists at levels beyond ordinary awareness. Instead of treating these thoughts as mere problems within your individual psychology, you might consider them as signals from the vast, interconnected field of consciousness that includes both you and the other person. This acknowledgement can itself bring a profound sense of peace. It doesn't answer all questions, but it holds the experience in a more spacious context that allows for a kind of sacred mystery. The thoughts that feel so intimate and defining are actually movements in a much larger field connected to countless conditions beyond what we typically consider personal. Seeing this doesn't make the thoughts disappear, but it helps us hold them more lightly with less identification and suffering. Perhaps what is happening is exactly what needs to happen in the larger unfolding of consciousness itself. Perhaps these persistent thoughts are not evidence of failure or dysfunction, but expressions of connections that serve purposes our ordinary minds can't fully comprehend. This view does not romanticize painful fixations or excuse unhealthy attachments. Instead, it invites us to hold our experience in a context spacious enough to include dimensions beyond our conventional understanding. When you sit in deep meditation and truly examine the nature of your thoughts, you begin to recognize that they don't belong to you in the way you typically imagine. They are not personal possessions. Thoughts arise in consciousness the way waves arise in the ocean. They are movements of a larger field, not the property of a separate self. And this beautiful understanding opens the door to our next practice, a deep and compassionate way of working with this very interconnectedness. Last night, we explored the idea that persistent thoughts might be more than just personal psychology. They might be signals from the vast, interconnected field of consciousness itself. Tonight, we put that understanding into practice with a profound Tibetan Buddhist method called Tonglen, which translates to sending and taking. This is a radical and courageous practice that works directly with the pain of obsessive thinking, transforming it from a personal torment into a bridge of boundless compassion. Our usual instinct when feeling the pain of these thoughts is to push them away or try to get rid of them. We want to be free from the burden. But Tonglen invites the opposite approach. Instead of trying to get rid of the pain of obsessive thinking, you intentionally breathe it in. As you inhale, you breathe in the pain, the sadness, the longing, not just your own, but the pain of everyone who has ever suffered from similar thoughts. You breathe in the hurt of every person who has ever been consumed by a memory, the deep longing of every heart that has been broken, and the frustration of every mind that has been caught in a loop of obsession. You are not taking on their suffering to make it your own. You are simply acknowledging your shared humanity. Then, as you exhale, you imagine sending out relief and spaciousness to all beings caught in obsessive thinking. You breathe out peace to the person in your thoughts, even if you feel they caused you pain. You breathe out healing to yourself. You breathe out clarity to every mind that feels trapped. This practice transforms isolation into connection. The pain of persistent thoughts about someone is no longer just your private burden. It's part of the universal human experience of attachment and loss. By connecting your personal suffering to this wider dimension, the thoughts lose some of their personal sting and become a gateway to compassion. They become a sacred opportunity to open your heart, a chance to breathe in what is difficult and breathe out what is healing. A teacher described this process beautifully. When you feel the sharp pain of obsessive thinking, remember that countless others feel this exact same pain right now. Breathe in for all of us, acknowledging our shared human struggle. Breathe out, sending relief and peace to everyone caught in these thought patterns. This practice doesn't magically eliminate thoughts about the person, but it changes their meaning from a personal torment to a profound bridge of compassion, connecting you with all others who suffer. This connection points to another essential Buddhist teaching, the understanding that you are not alone in this struggle. The Buddha himself acknowledged that difficult thoughts and emotions arise for everyone, even those with years of meditation practice. What distinguishes the wise practitioner is not the absence of such thoughts, but the way they are met with awareness rather than identification, with compassion rather than judgment. There is a beautiful teaching from the Thai forest tradition that captures this. The untrained mind is like a dog that chases every stick thrown. It runs here and there, exhausting itself. The trained mind sees the stick but doesn't chase it. It stays at ease in its own nature. This doesn't mean the trained mind no longer sees the stick. Thoughts of the person still arise, but it no longer feels compelled to chase after them, to elaborate on them, or to define itself by them. This capacity to see without chasing is the very essence of freedom. Last night, we understood that the trained mind no longer chases every thought like a dog after a stick. This capacity to see without chasing connects to one of Buddhism's most liberating and challenging teachings, the teaching of not self, anatta. When you say, I can't stop thinking about them, who is the I that seems so separate from and troubled by these thoughts? Is there truly a fixed, unchanging self who owns or controls the thinking process? Or is that very sense of a solid, separate self actually constructed by thought itself? Buddhist meditation invites us to investigate this question directly, not as a philosophical puzzle, but as a lived experience. The next time a thought of this person arises, sit with it gently and ask, who is the thinker of this thought? Can you notice the sense of I that seems to be doing the thinking? Can you observe how this I is itself a mental construction, a thought arising in awareness just like the thoughts about the other person? This investigation into the nature of self touches on the understanding that what we take to be a solid, continuous, independent self is actually a process, a flowing river of changing experiences without a fixed center or controller. The sense of being a separate self haunted by thoughts of another separate self is an appearance in consciousness, not its ultimate reality. As this understanding deepens, there's a natural relaxation of the grip of persistent thoughts. If there's no solid me being haunted by thoughts of a solid them, then the whole dynamic shifts. What remains is simply awareness itself, in which thoughts arise and pass without creating a problem or defining an identity. A Zen master expressed this with elegant simplicity. Let thoughts come and let thoughts go. Just don't serve them tea. You don't need to eliminate thoughts about someone, nor do you need to entertain them with endless elaboration and dramatic storylines. You can simply let them come and go in the open space of awareness without making them into a problem. This perspective doesn't mean you're cold or detached from your feelings. Rather, it's about recognizing the fluid, impermanent nature of all experience, including your thoughts and emotions. It's about seeing that you are not defined or limited by these thoughts even when they persist. You are the awareness and they are simply the contents of that awareness. This journey of letting thoughts come and go is a gradual process that embodies what Buddhism calls bhavana, or cultivation. It is the slow, deliberate development of beneficial qualities and habits of mind through intentional practice. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, especially with deeply conditioned thought patterns about significant relationships. Rather than expecting instant results or criticizing yourself when an old pattern reemerges, you must approach this process with patience. It is like growing a garden from seeds. You create the right conditions, good soil, adequate water, and sunlight, and then you trust the natural process of growth. You don't dig up the seeds every day to see if they're growing yet. Working with persistent thoughts is similar. At first, the old path of obsessive thinking is wide and well-worn easy to fall into without realizing it. consistent practice, each time you gently choose the new path, turn to awareness, becomes a little clearer, a little more established. Eventually, it may become the default road, the way your mind naturally moves when thoughts of this person arise. There is a beautiful teaching story about this gradual nature of practice. A young monk complained to his teacher that, despite years of meditation, disturbing thoughts still arose in his mind. The teacher took him to a stream and asked him to stir up the muddy bottom with a stick. The water became cloudy and opaque. Then the teacher said, "Now stop stirring and watch." Gradually, the mud settled and the water became clear again. Your mind is like this water, the teacher explained. When you stop stirring it up with constant engagement with thoughts, the natural clarity of awareness reveals itself. This natural clarity is always present even when thoughts seem most persistent and troubling. The practice is not to create a clarity that wasn't there, but to allow the mud of obsessive thinking to settle so that the inherent clarity of awareness can shine through. This transformation of torment into teaching is at the heart of Buddhist practice. It's the recognition that our most difficult experiences, including persistent thoughts about someone, are not obstacles to our well-being, but opportunities to discover a freedom that doesn't depend on external circumstances. This freedom within difficulty is what Buddhism calls liberation in the midst of conditions. It's not a transcendent state beyond everyday life, but the discovery of a spaciousness right in the heart of our ordinary human existence with all its attachments and complexities. The person who won't leave your thoughts is not preventing this discovery. They are providing an opportunity to realize it more fully. A meditation teacher described it beautifully. When you can sit quietly with thoughts of someone who once caused you great pain without getting lost in the storyline about what happened, simply meeting them with clear, compassionate awareness, you are discovering a freedom that was always available. This testing through difficulty is not a punishment. It's how the heart grows in wisdom and compassion. Just as physical muscles develop through resistance trainings, our capacity for awareness develops by meeting the resistance of challenging thoughts. The person who won't leave your mind is providing a form of spiritual resistance training, strengthening your capacity to remain present and compassionate even when it's difficult. This shift doesn't happen through force of will or clever psychological strategies. It happens through the consistent practice of the fundamental Buddhist teachings we have explored: impermanence, emptiness, compassion, mindfulness, and the middle way. Each time you apply these teachings to persistent thoughts, you are not just working with those specific thoughts. You are transforming your relationship with all of your experience. And this transformation is the heart of the path. The goal isn't to eliminate particular thoughts, but to cultivate the capacity to meet all experiences with clear, compassionate awareness. This capacity is your birthright, always available beneath the surface of mental activity. This brings us to the final part of our journey, the culmination of all the wisdom we have explored. The goal is not to never think about the person again. The goal is to be free even when thoughts arise, to know yourself as the boundless awareness in which thoughts appear rather than as a separate, self-defined and controlled by thinking. This freedom within thinking is what Buddhism calls liberation. In the midst of conditions, not a transcendent state beyond everyday experience, but the discovery of spaciousness right in the heart of your ordinary human life. A Zen master captured this with elegant simplicity. The mind is like the sky, and thoughts are like clouds. No matter how dark or stormy, the clouds, they don't stain the sky. In the same way, thoughts about this person may move through your awareness, sometimes heavy and dark, other times light and wispy, but they don't define or diminish the awareness itself. Recognizing yourself as this vast sky-like awareness is the heart of the practice. It's not a conceptual understanding, but a direct lived experience that becomes increasingly accessible through consistent practice. As this perspective deepens, something unexpected often happens. The thoughts that once seemed so persistent and troubling gradually begin to loosen their grip naturally without any effort to eliminate them. They lose their power to disturb your peace because you have stopped feeding them with the energy of resistance and identification. A Zen master captured this beautifully. What you fight, you strengthen. What you resist persists. What you meet with awareness transforms. This natural transformation doesn't happen overnight. Buddhist practice emphasizes patience and persistence, qualities that become objects of cultivation themselves. The person who won't leave your thoughts is not preventing your freedom. They are providing a profound opportunity to discover what true freedom really is, not the absence of particular experiences, but the presence of an awareness that can hold all experiences without being defined by any of them. This is your birthright, something to be recognized and remembered in the midst of your ordinary life. Remember, the person who won't leave your head isn't there by accident. They're carrying a message meant specifically for you, a teaching that can transform your suffering into wisdom if you know how to listen. And that wisdom doesn't just free you from obsessive thinking. It reveals the fundamental freedom that has been your true nature all along, a freedom no thought can ever disturb or diminish.